Hey, welcome to another episode of Chad's Beer Podcast. This week I'm talking to Marty Nachel. What's going on, man?
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, in case you missed it, Marty and I just did a Tuesday night beer school on English brown ale styles. We did Cigar City versus Sam Smith's. So check that out. I will have links somewhere around here. Um, I forget how I heard of you initially. Well, I'm pretty sure I heard of you because of Beer for Dummies, you know, and like I think this is the second edition, but I'm pretty sure I owned the first edition at some point because um I remember getting it because so, I don't know if you're familiar with like my beer story, but I'll tell it really quick. So I was born in '76, and then I joined the Navy when I was in my early 20s, and I was in Norfolk, Virginia, and we went, you know, around the world. Well, not around the world, but overseas, and came back. And I remember going to countries in Europe, went to Iceland, even like Africa. And I remember just like trying like all the different beers they had there. I just want to try something I can't get at home. And just being like so crazed, like, wow, these beers are so much better than the stuff that I've had at home. And then when I got home, I like found there were beer stores that sold beer from around the world, aside from just like Heineken or Carlsberg or something like that. Beers with like actual color, and I was like, wow, like I just like had so much fun trying these new styles. And I remember I was like, oh, I want to learn more about beer. And I remember picking up Beer for Dummies, the first edition. And I remember um, I know you mentioned in here somewhere. Like I remember when I got to the term gravity, it just like blew my mind. I was like, gravity, like what does physics have to do with like the pull of the earth on, what does that have to do with beer? It's a very weird, I don't know who came up with the term gravity to describe, it's not just for beer. It's,
Right,
it
right.
could be technically you could use it for like any fluid, I guess, but
Including Mercury.
yeah. But yeah, so your original first edition of Beer for Dummies was like my beer 101. And this is probably like a good 20 years ago. And also, I mean, like Michael Jackson's Great Beer Guide.
Gotta have Michael
Yeah.
Jackson.
It's funny because I bet you a lot of the beers that are in here like probably aren't even made anymore.
Probably
Or
not, unfortunately.
yeah, or like the recipes have changed. Or well, I mean, there are some classics in there, but anyway. Um
Yeah, you can't see my library. It's all the shelves are right up here above my monitor.
is it
And
beer books?
I probably have beer and brewing books, and I probably have 4 or 5 Michael Jackson books up there. I'm looking at them right now.
Yeah. I also have his beer companion.
I have that one.
Was this his first beer book?
No, no, his first one was World Guide to Beer.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like he
This is his first beer book.
I used to have that beer. I used to have that book. I don't know what I did with it.
This was published in 1977.
Okay, yeah, because I think this one was like early '90s or something. And I was like, "There's no way that was his first beer book." Um, yeah. So anyway, I don't know. Like I've just heard your name a lot. Like on All About Beer and other like beer websites and beer blogs, and you know just being like when you're as much of a beer nerd as I am, And I got your two your self-published books off Amazon.
Those
So
are my
yeah, I
favorite
mean,
projects.
I guess we should start at the beginning. Like, where did you grow up? Like, how did you get into beer, and like, how did you get into writing?
Well, I'm from the Chicago area, and I actually tell this story in Beer for Dummies. So I don't know if you saw it or not,
Mhm.
but my first experience with what I would consider good beer, not necessarily craft, because it was early on. In 1982, my wife and I decided to take a trip up to Toronto, which is like a 10-hour drive from Chicago. We went up there for like just for the weekend,
Mhm.
and we had no plans. We just blew into town. We had no idea what we were going to do. So we went to, back then they had visitor centers or tourist centers, whatever they were called. And we walked in and said, okay, we're here for a weekend. Tell us what we should do. And the woman said, "Well, have you been to the CN Tower? That's the tallest man-made structure in North America." It's like, okay, cool. You can have dinner up there too. So we did. And she said, "Are you hockey fans?" I said, "Come on, we're from Chicago. Of course we are." The NHL Hockey Hall of Fame is in Toronto, so we checked that out as well. And so, we figured, okay, that's enough to keep us busy for a little while. As we're exiting, the woman says, "Oh, do you like beer?" Like, again, we're from Chicago. Of course, we like beer. And she said, "Are you aware that one of the largest breweries in all of North America is here in Toronto, the Molson Brewery?" It's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, no, I've heard of it, but no." She said, "Have you ever been on a tour?" It's like, "No, but keep talking." So anyway, she said, "Well, it's Saturday, and they do give tours on Saturday. They're free, so if you're into it, go check it out." Well, of course we did. And after the tour, which the tour itself was cool, this big industrialized, huge warehouse-like brewery, that in itself was impressive. But then at the end of the tour, they walk you into this very nice bar, and they serve you free samples of their beer, which, again, that's cool enough. But they served, like, I don't know, I don't remember how many, but it was like 6 or 8, maybe 10 different samples, and just, 3, 4 ounces of.
Mhm.
But with each sample, it got darker and darker and darker. Now, at that time, was drinking, I don't know if you've ever heard of Old Style, Heileman's Old Style.
Yeah.
That was the Chicago thing. It's
Yeah.
still around today, not brewed at the original brewery, but that's what I was drinking at that time. It's the equivalent of PBR or Budweiser or Miller.
Yeah.
Anyway, so keep in mind that that was my beer at the time that I went to Molson. So I'm drinking these beers, and as they get darker, I'm getting happier. It's like these are really good. Number one, they're fresh, brewery fresh. Number two, these dark beers I had never been exposed to before. And by the time I got to the porter, which was the darkest, I said, "That's it. I'm not drinking Old Style anymore. I have to start drinking real beer."
Mhm.
So returning to Chicago, that began my quest for good beer. And so I did what, this is pre-internet. So I had to find out most everything by word of mouth or phone book or whatever.
Yeah.
I was able to
Library.
locate a local store that actually had a decent beer selection. So I made a point every Friday after I got off of work, I would head straight there. I would peruse the aisles and shelves, and I would purposely pick a 6 pack of something I had never had before, or maybe never even heard of before, take it home, chill it down,
Mhm.
sit down and drink one or
Yeah.
two. And
I like
I consciously wrote notes about what I was tasting. Very,
I did like almost the exact same thing, like, because I remember when I got back from, going like, we were overseas for, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 months, something like that, and then we got back in Virginia, and, like, there's the package store, the Navy Exchange, and, like, everything there's, like, tax-free too, and, like, I do
mm,
the same thing. I would just grab some random six-pack, some beer I never heard of, and, just try that. Although I like that this is before you could buy singles,
yeah,
which I pretty much every beer I get now is just in singles. It's very rare that I buy like a 6 pack or a 12 pack. I used to love, and I'm actually kind of going back to this, is like buying like Sam Adams and Magic Hat and Saranac, like mix packs, variety packs, whatever you want to call them.
mhm,
Because like that's a good way to like sample a line, and like it's actually you know f- relatively cheap. It's certainly cheaper than if you bought like an individual
sure.
can of each one.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and actually, I kind of missed because Sam Adams used to do like 4 times a year for whatever each season they'd have a mix pack, and it was like 6 different beers, 2 bottles of each, and now they do like maybe 3 or 4 beers and 3 or 4 bottles of each. I really miss having 6 instead of 3 or 4. Um, yeah, that's for anybody who's like just getting into beer. I actually think like those supermarket mix packs are like a good like stepping stone or whatever.
I agree.
So, yeah, you said that was like in the early '80s?
Um, well, 82 is when I went up to Toronto.
Mhm.
It was in 85 that I realized that you could make beer at home. So that's when I located a store. I had to drive like 20 miles to
Mhm.
find it, but bought all my original homebrew equipment, started making beer at home. And boom, I did that for the next 30 years.
Did you have a book or
It's
instructions
really
or
for
anything?
Bayesians. Yeah. His original book came out in, I think, 79.
Yeah, because usually the Charlie Papazian Joy of
That,
Homebrewing. This is the
yeah, that's
third
the second or
edition.
third edition.
Yeah, I had to get him on the show because he's like, kind of like a rock star, among homebrewers and beer nerds and all that. And
I was
also
just judging with him down in Mexico about not quite a month ago.
another good one is How to Brew from John Palmer.
He was also down there.
I'm pretty sure the BJCP uses these two books as like the syllabus for the entrance exam, because there is like you have to know like a little bit of chemistry and microbiology to pass the entrance exam, and it's hard to explain like just like without full context. Like I actually a few years ago I started a website called bjcptestprep.com. I
Nice.
was gonna like do I was basically trying to turn one of these books into like a course of like videos, but like like I can read it and then but like it's hard to like regurgitate all this information unless like you know it like really intimately, and like I'm
Right,
certainly
right.
not a chemist or a microbiologist, I'm not a professional brewer, and I kind of abandoned the project. Um, but yeah, like sorry, I don't have a copy of your Homebrewing for Dummies because I don't homebrew anymore. I do have some other homebrewing books here that I just got off of like Craigslist. Like somebody was selling like a lot, so like,
Hmm.
hey, all these homebrewing books for $20. Um, but yeah, actually, uh, getting back to beer for dummies. Like I said, I remember reading the first edition like 20 years ago or something, and yeah, just like that's it's a great beer 101 book. So is Tasting Beer by Randy Mosier. Love that
Absolutely.
one. Um, so how did the two beer and homebrew for dummy books come about?
Um, it's kind of a long story. I'll keep it as short as I can. Um, my the Beer for Dummies was actually started because I wrote a previous book called Beer Across America.
Hmm.
It's a book that nobody's ever heard of, didn't sell very many of them. But the point is that the book producer in New York who helped me publish that, he was also working for the couple, the wife, husband and wife, who did Wine for Dummies. So he was very familiar with the publisher who did those books. Well, as soon as they published Wine for Dummies, he got on the phone to me and said, "We need to do Beer for Dummies," because at that point, nothing had been done.
Hmm.
So we put together a presentation. We presented it to the publisher, and they loved it. They said, "Yes, let's do this." And it took about almost a full year from the time we presented the idea till the book was actually published. But the cool thing about it was 3 of the chapters within Beer for Dummies were about homebrewing.
Hmm.
So when the book was published and was marketed, the publisher was getting a lot of good feedback on just those 3 chapters on homebrewing. So they came back to me. They got back to my agent and said, "Hey, do you think this your author would like to do a book just on homebrewing?" So of course, I was not going to say no to that opportunity. So Beer for Dummies was published in 1996. We got homebrewing published by the same time in 1997, so just a year later. And of course, both of those have been republished, a second edition and a third edition.
Wow. Do you remember like what your writing process was like back then? Were you just using like a word processor, or did you have Microsoft Word, or how did that work?
We're talking, well, when I first started writing, it was the late 80s. But by the time these projects came around, Microsoft Word had been created. So it wasn't all that difficult.
Hmm.
Um, when I was writing for, let's say, All About Beer magazine or Zymergen magazine or any of those things as a freelancer, I just kind of wrote freestyle, whatever my topic was. I wrote, you know, in my
Right.
voice for those. When
Right.
it came to writing these For Dummies books, it became kind of uncomfortable for me, at least at first, because they have a template that they give all of the authors saying you must write within these guidelines. You have
Right,
to write
right.
according to how we want you to write. And it was I found it very confining at first. I didn't like it. But by the time I got to the second book, it's like, this is very helpful. It makes it so much easier on me. I have to do less thinking and less formatting. So most of the work that I've done has been for these dummies books. So it's been a breeze, really. I mean, I can't complain.
Yeah, and this the second edition came out in what, 2012 or something?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Well, actually, I'll just check the copyright on here. And
Because
it has, you have a 2012. It looks like it was co-written with Steve Ettlinger.
he's my agent. He wanted
Okay.
his name on the cover too. He knows nothing about home brewing, very little about beer, but he was my agent. So
Yeah, he got the with credit. Although you
exactly.
did get Jim Cook of Sam Adams to write the foreword.
Yeah, good old Jim.
I met him in 20. Actually, it's funny. I think it was in 2012 or 2013. I went to the beer bloggers convention in Boston.
Nice.
And one of, like, we did a bunch of tours, and one of them was to obviously the Sam Adams brewery. And we got to go like into the barrel room where they have the utopias,
Yeah.
and they were just passing that gold bottle around, and like I just kept like taking pours off of it. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep doing this until somebody tells me to stop, because I know this is like each pour that I'm taking. This is like a good $20-$30 pour, because
Probably.
those
Yep.
bottles are like 20 or 250 or $300, something like that. I
Sure.
did manage to get. I got a. I forget what vintage it was, but I remember because I did it for episode number 1000 of my beer review show, which at the time I thought it was gonna be the last episode ever. And I got like a half empty bottle on eBay for like $50 or something, and it was, each bottle is like numbered,
Right.
and I had bottle number 666.
That's good.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why the dude wanted to sell it. Maybe it was cursed.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Back
So
in the
what, like,
late, I
sorry,
was gonna say
sorry
late,
to interrupt.
I was
Going back, like, before the books and all that, like, are you a writer by trade? Like, what's your actual
no,
day
no
job or career?
avocation. I always had a knack for writing. I always enjoyed writing. And when I first started getting into beer, I noticed that there weren't a lot of books available and just a couple of magazines here or there. And so I thought, well, this might be an opportunity that, as I learn more about beer, I can kind of package that up in an article and, give it back to the industry or the readership. And so that's kind of how it happened. I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed writing about beer, especially. And, one thing led to another. I just got more and more experience. And, I guess in a sense, I was one of the early adapters. There weren't a lot of beer writers around back then. So
Yeah. Although All About Beer magazine's been around since I think the late 70s, but I think,
1979.
yeah, it's been kind of like an underground kind of magazine. It's not something you like get at the supermarket or the airport, you
No,
know?
it was. I think it was subscription only for a long time.
Mhm.
My first article for them was in 1987.
Oh, you remember what you wrote about?
Yeah, it was about. I don't know that you would recognize it because it's a Chicago thing. There was a very famous restaurant here in Chicago called the Berghoff,
Mhm.
and it wasn't just a restaurant. The people who opened the Berghoff actually owned a brewery. They opened up a brewery in 1898 in Indiana. And in order for them to start selling beer in Chicago, they had to open up a restaurant. And so that's how the restaurant got made and everything evolved from that. Eventually, they sold the brewery and operated nothing but the restaurant. But here in Chicago, the Berghoff name is very, very well known. So that's what the
Mhm.
article was on.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I used to have a blog with the Albany Times Union. Um, it was started by George DiPiero. He and then he was the head brewer at the Albany Pump Station at the time, and then he went on to found Druthers in Saratoga, New York. Actually, I think they have like 2 or 3 locations now, and yeah, they make really good beer. And George is a grandmaster BJCP. Actually, I haven't talked to him in years. I need to get him on this show. We got to catch up.
Yeah, I'm
'Cause-
familiar with the name.
yeah, have you ever been to the Albany area?
One time, many years ago.
Okay, because like Albany is kind of claim to fame. Well, as far as like beer go, well, there's a few of them. I mean, like there's Albany Ale, which goes back to like the 1800s. Which for a while there, Albany was like the brewing capital of the United States. So they're
Really?
making what they called Albany Ale. It's basically like kind of like an English strong ale. And actually, because back in I think it was 2012 or 13, like it was like the 100 or 150th anniversary or whatever, and like all the breweries in Albany started remaking Albany Ale, and like there was a home brewing recipe that went out, and it was basically like an English strong ale. The only thing I can compare it to is like maybe you ever had like Fuller's Vintage Ale.
Not that one in particular, no.
Or maybe like actually funny, Sam Smith's Winter Welcome Ale they put out every Christmas.
Yep, had that.
Sort of like that, but like it's kind of like a reddish color beer, and they use like a lot of like invert sugar in it, just to jack the ABV up. And
Mhm.
they actually use a little bit of salt in it, and like brewer's licorice, so it has like a little bit of a spice to it. But anyway, yeah, so like Albany, that was Albany's claim to fame as far as beer went. And then modern, recently was Mahar's Beer Bar, which like was known, had like a reputation around the world for like being like this small bar, kind of like, you know, not like back then, like when they started it, Albany wasn't a beer town, but what they had was, like they had this computer, and you would sign up, and like every time you went into the bar, you would type your membership number into the computer, and it prints out a menu of all the beers they have on tap and all the bottles and cans that you haven't had yet. So
Oh,
like when you
wow.
have a beer, the bartender highlights it, and then when you leave, you put it like in a basket, and then when you come back the next time, like your menu gets shorter and shorter unless they've added new stuff. And you get freebies, like when you hit 50, you get like a Mahar's t-shirt, and then when you hit 100, they give you a free case of whatever beer you want. And then I think 150 or 250, something like that, like you got like a mug, and they would etch whatever pattern or logo you wanted on it, and like you would get all your draft beers like at a discount.
That's
And
pretty
then like
sweet.
yeah, and yes, Mahar's closed in I don't know, I think it's like 2013 or so, something like that. But the space is still there. They completely gutted it, and they built a new bar in its place called Madison Poorhouse. I mean, it's just not the same, but yeah, I've always dreamed about opening a beer bar and doing the same thing of like having that, just like it's like a freaking DOS computer from like the early 80s. It's a very simple program. All you do is just type in your membership number, and it prints out a menu. Like you don't really need a lot of bells and whistles for that.
That's
So,
so many.
a lot of people like have at least heard of Mahar's.
But that means somebody has to do that data entry, taking everybody's information about all the beer menus,
Yeah.
with what they've had and what they,
Yeah.
entering that work.
I would bet probably only like maybe 5% of the actual patrons did it. Most people can't be
Mm,
bothered. It's like,
gotcha.
but if you were that loyal, they were loyal to you. Like Jim Mahar, the owner at the time, he was known for like he would like go to Canada and like smuggle back casks, you know, just like in his car. Like when they asked, like, "Do you have anything? Are you claiming anything?" Nope, nothing to declare. It was the only place that you could get. They had 6 cask engines.
Really?
Yeah, like you can't even. I mean, if you're near Chicago, maybe there's beer bars there that do cask beer. But ever since I moved to Florida, I haven't seen any cask beer. Is there any cask around where you are?
There might be. I couldn't name any off the top of my head. I don't actually live in the city. I'm a suburbanite.
Mhm.
But I would venture to guess that even those bars that do have uh, that do real ale, supposed real ale.
Mhm.
It's usually gravity feed on top of the bar. They don't have the beer engines. You know, they don't have the investment in all the equipment. It's usually just for a one-off, just for a special occasion.
Yeah, and I've heard from a lot of like pro brewers and distributors. A lot of those are just cheats, anyways, where they just
Yeah,
fill them up. Like
yeah,
it's not even because like cask beer is kind of like bottle conditioned beer, where it's like they add like a little bit of sugar and yeast to naturally carbonated it, whereas like like this stuff is all forced carb, you know,
yep,
and like so like I don't know. I've heard a lot of insiders say a lot of cask beer is really fake. It's just it's filled the same way they would fill a keg, but it's just in a cask or
right,
a firkin or whatever you want to call it.
exactly. Yeah, there used to be a festival around here called Firkenfest,
Hmm.
and it was nothing but all those fake, not real ales,
Hmm.
just
What's
for show.
what's your favorite styles of beer?
Um, it's going to sound so cliche, but I really do like hops, so I drink a lot of IPA. But aside from that, I'm also a big Belgian fan. I love Belgian triple.
Hmm.
Um, not that I drink a lot of the dark strongs, but I like those as well. I like. I told you when we were doing the tasting that I like beer with character. I like beer with complexity. So that's what I gravitate towards.
Hmm. Something I noticed when I started pursuing BJCP and like actually and I was homebrewing is like you kind of like and I said this on other podcasts, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. You kind of become like a born again beer snob where um because like when you get into beer, you realize like you were drinking like all that fizzy yellow beer, full of corn and rice and all that, and like once you start homebrewing or like you realize at least have an appreciation for the craft, you realize like how difficult those beers are to make, especially like on a mass scale and like all the quality control that goes into it.
Hmm.
And I mean, like even fizzy yellow beer is our recognized beer styles, and like you like once you actually you start to like taste like all the individual hops and malts and all the ingredients and things like that, and you go back to the macro fizzy yellow beers, you can kind of approach it like with new eyes or with like a new tongue, I guess,
New appreciation. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I mean, like also becoming beer certified, beer judge certified, is you start to like taste all the off flavors you might not have noticed before.
Yeah, it's
Like
funny. I get one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do you ever turn off the judge switch when you're drinking beer? Do you just drink beer for the sake of drinking beer?
mhm,
And my honest answer is typically not. It's
mhm.
rare that I drink beer that I drink it just to drink it. I'm always judging. I'm always evaluating. I'm always aware of what it is I'm smelling and tasting. And
Yeah. I mean, like for the same reason, like you don't turn off your food judge,
mm,
you know, like even if you're like, I'm going to like a bar and having hot wings, like you still want it to like still taste good or at least like, like I know it's not like it's not this like hot wings versus I don't know beef Wellington or whatever. It's like hot wings from the dive bar, especially when you've had a few. Like there's like nothing like that compares. Like like all right, so hot wings at the dive bar after you've had a few beers versus putting on a tie and a jacket and going to like a Michelin star rated restaurant. Like they both have their I don't know, je ne sais quoi character to it, Uh, Matt from Massive Beer Reviews kind of put this in my head. He was on the show a few months ago, and he said, kind of think of it like he's like, go up to anybody, ask them what their favorite movies are. 9 times out of 10, the majority of their lists are probably going to be comedies because like they're very fun to watch or they're very easy to watch.
exactly.
But it's like, but comedies don't win Oscars, So like when the critics or your professors tell you what the best movies are, like Citizen Kane and Godfather and or whatever, something like that, like they're like, yeah, you get it why like they're highly acclaimed and they're considered high art, but how come the stuff people actually really like isn't the ones winning the awards. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but when I used to do this show, a good 10 years ago, I used to always say like, like what's your rubric? What's your criteria for judging beer? Is it just the BJCP guidelines, or do you have something else?
Well, because I kind of cut my teeth on the BJCP guidelines, that is the baseline.
Hmm.
But once you start judging in other formats, in other locations, you realize that the BJCP, for all it's good, it's not the be all and end all.
Hmm.
There are other methodologies. There are other ways of doing things. There are other written guidelines for the same beers. You can take guidelines written in Europe and compare them to the BJCP guidelines, and they don't always match up.
Hmm.
So you have to be aware of that, and you're judging according to where you are and what competition or what guidelines you're using. You have to
Yeah.
be adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of them even in the States, like, because I think the Brewers Association has their own guidelines, and if you judge at the GABF, like, they have their own guidelines too. They don't just go by off BJCP.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen any of the European ones. I imagine because like there's kind of like when you pick up like like one of these beer books at the library or a bookstore or something like that, like they kind of use like broad terms like IPA, but then like people like you and me know like IPA, like that's like almost like there's like 20 different IPAs, like you mean single IPA, double IPA, hazy IPA,
Yep.
East
Cold
Coast
IPA.
versus West Coast, you know, all the various colors, although they don't really seem to make those anymore. Remember like a good 10 years ago, like the colored IPAs was like the next revolution, like black IPA, red IPA, white IPA,
Yeah, it's kind
brewed
of getting there.
IPA. What was the dumbest IPA substyle in your opinion? I'd probably say brute.
Yeah, I was leaning towards that. I'm trying to think of what all I've experienced over the years. Yeah, I brewed IPA just never really sold me. I don't think it sold a lot of people.
Mm,
I wouldn't say it was necessarily a dumb style. It didn't make sense to me, and obviously it didn't to most people.
yeah, I never thought hazies were gonna catch on, but it's funny, like, now, like, it's so hard to get an IPA that's, like, not hazy. Like, even Stone is getting into it. I found this at Total Wine the other day, and it's actually fairly cheap. They did have that Fear Movie Lions, which also was a hazy, but I kinda prefer, like, like, Dogfish 60-minute Stone IPA, uh, Bell's Two Hearted, um, things like that. Like, when it comes to IPA, do you have, like, a niche preference? Like, do you, like, prefer the classics, or do you like the hazies, or
I will say that I can appreciate a good hazy, and from my experience, they're few and far between.
Mhm,
But there are some good ones out there. But I gravitate towards the West Coast.
mhm.
Um, when I came into the industry back in the early '80s, that's really all there was. It was West Coast or nothing.
Yeah, I remember, like, when Stone really blew up and they were, like, still Mavericks, like, Ruination, like, it was called Ruination because like, everybody was like, "It's gonna ruin your palate, like, you're never gonna be able to taste anything again," or Arrogant Bastard too, like, super, super high IBU beers. It's funny, I just had Double Bastard, like, a week or 2 ago.
Mhm.
I believe that's, like it's gotta be, like, at least 100 IBUs, if not more, and, if you watch my review of it or read my review of it, I kinda said what I said, kind of about, like, the movies. It's kind of it's kind of like the Godfather or Citizen Kane or one of those types of movies where it's like, yeah, I realize, like, this is a masterpiece, but just because it's a masterpiece doesn't mean I, like, super enjoy it. It's like, okay, I'm glad I experienced it, but I'm like, I'm not gonna be in a rush to go back to it.
Mhm.
Like, I'm gonna give this an A, but, you would think, like, if you gave something an A, you'd wanna be, like, drinking it, like, constantly, but, what's funny is, like, um, kind of going back to what I was saying before, about being like the born again beer snob or whatever, is like I keep not in this fridge, in my food fridge, I have a 12 pack of Jenny Cream Ale in there. Like that's like my when I have nothing else, like because everything that's in here is like for reviews. Like when I just want a beer to drink, like I'll go with Jenny Cream Ale or something like not you know macroy, although maybe Miller High Life, that's a pretty good one, or PBR.
Yeah.
Do you have like a daily drinker or like a guilty pleasure beer like that?
Uh, daily drinker. I mean, if we're talking about just a sit down and slug a beer kind of thing,
Mhm.
like don't think about it, don't evaluate it. I love a good German Pilsner, and
Yeah,
I
agreed.
really don't even care who makes it as long as it's a good German Pilsner.
Yeah.
You know,
Speaking of which, you ever shop at Aldi?
rarely, rarely.
Okay. Well, next time you're at Aldi, they have a German Pilsner there called wernsgrüner,
Yeah,
and
Wernesgrund.
yeah, to me that is a to me it's like at least a 40 point German Pils. It's funny they changed it. It used to come in 6 packs of 12-ounce bottles, but now it comes in 4 packs of 500 ml cans.
Yeah,
Although I think I actually prefer 6 to 4, but
you and I
um,
both.
that it's like this cheap beer that tastes really good, and you can get it, at Aldi. So next time you're at Aldi, check out Werner's Gruner. Let me know what you
I have
think.
to make a point of that. There
Yeah.
is one not too far from me, so yeah, I should check it out.
Hmm.
I've actually had that beer before, but it's been many years.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with like any imported beer because it actually comes, from overseas. Um, it's like you're just not going to be able to get it as good as it is at the source. Have you ever been to Oktoberfest in Germany?
Long story there. I was actually in Bavaria during the Oktoberfest season. I have a friend who lives there, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be around. Do you want to go to Oktoberfest with me?" And he goes, "What are you nuts? Because Germans don't go to Oktoberfest." I said,
It's
"What do
all
you mean?"
tourists.
He said, "It's nothing but drunk tourists." And so he actually talked me out of going to the Oktoberfest in Munich.
Hmm.
Instead, we detoured. We went to Augsburg, which is about, I don't know, less than 3 hours away. We hung out there for a couple of days until Oktoberfest in Munich was over. Then we went there and we saw the aftermath of the Oktoberfest. So we still got to drink the beers. We still got to see the grounds. We still got to enjoy, the Gemütlichkeit. But no, we weren't actually there when Oktoberfest was going on.
Mm. Yeah, I always had this fantasy of doing a beer drinking tour around Europe.
Mm,
Um, I don't speak German, but I know like most people in Europe, whatever country they're in, they like know like at least a little bit of English.
yeah,
Were
from my
you able to?
experience.
I don't know if you speak German or not. Were you able to get by?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, the Germans do, a lot of them do speak English, but I
Mhm.
knew just enough to get by, how to order a beer, where's, ask where the bathroom is.
Yeah, I took Spanish in high school. That's like one of the first things they teach you. Donde está la?
El baño.
Um, yeah, Cuatro de Baño. There's a lot of Spanish speakers here in Florida. A lot of Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, all that. And like so I'm an Uber driver. Well, it's one of my jobs, and I have like water for sale, and I have like a sign that says bottled water for $1, or I forget how it is in Spanish, but um, yeah, I feel bad when the Spanish speakers are in my car and like I can't really talk to them. But like they just give me $1 and I give them a cold bottle of water.
That's a good deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Have,
if it's cold, sure.
what about like the British Commonwealth? You've been to England, Ireland, those places?
Um, England, Scotland, Wales.
Hmm.
I was in Dublin for a whole day. Yeah.
It's more than I've been. Did you get to go to Guinness?
You know, another stupid story. Like I said, we were in Dublin for a whole 24 hours. It was on a Sunday. Guinness
Hmm.
is not open on Sunday.
Uh,
Missed it.
was it just like a stopover on a flight?
We were touring. We were driving throughout the British Isles. So we took a ferry across from Wales to Dublin. Just did an overnight, just enough to see the city, and then took off again.
Cool. Yeah, I gotta get over there sometime. I give a lot of tourist rides because I'm in Orlando, so I end up at Disney. In fact, I was just at Disney like all day today,
Hmm.
and I almost always end up giving English, Irish, Welsh, Scottish tourists drives around, and I always try to bond with them over a beer. Because I probably and more often than not, unless they're like a super hardcore beer nerd, I usually know more about their beer than they do. Did you ever find that, like, when you went over to Europe?
On occasion, yeah,
Um, what's, like, your favorite European beer style? I mean, you said you like Belgian,
yeah.
but,
On
like,
German
any
pills.
yeah. You like any, like, super niche beers? Like, probably, like, Lichtenhainer is probably, like, the most or what's the smoked Polish beer? Piwo or whatever?
Grodziskia,
I don't know how to pronounce it.
yeah, Grodziskia. Um, I've had a handful of those. I like them. It's not something I would drink regularly.
Mhm.
Same with the Lichtenhainer. But one beer that I do like, kind of related to that, is the German Rauch beer. I
Oh,
really
yeah.
like that
I
a
got one
lot.
right here.
Yeah, cool.
I saved
Uh,
this for, I was supposed to do a podcast with, John
Schlenkerla.
Hall from All About Beer, and I know he loves smoked beer.
Hmm.
So, I told him, if he can get this, we'll do the same thing like you and I did. Like, we'll do a review of it or a beer school about it, and then, we'll do the podcast. Do you know John Hall?
I do. Yep, know him pretty well. I mean, he owns All About Beer now, so
Yeah.
I've
I
written
like his podcast. It's funny, like, there's tons of beer podcasts out there.
a lot.
Um, and, like, mostly they just, like, talk to brewers about, how did you start this brewery and, like, what do you do different and all that stuff, and I usually find interviews with actual pro brewers, like, not all that entertaining. But so, like, I know John and his staff, they usually take, like, a slightly different approach where they usually do, like, roundtables, like, at beer fests and stuff like that. Do you listen or watch any beer podcasts?
Not enough. I mean, I should make a point of watching more. I honestly, I can't find the time.
Yeah.
I would love to do some more, but I don't.
Yeah, it's the craft beer scene in, like, the media craft beer scene is, like, really, like, on shaky grounds, like, right now. Like, did you hear, Good Beer Hunting is shutting down?
What a shame.
Yeah, I was never a huge fan of them, but I didn't dislike them, but, like, they were, like, definitely, like, one of the most popular beer resources. Um,
They were trusted, that's for sure.
yeah, and I don't know, like, what happened, like, how they just ran out of money or whatever.
The way I heard it was that they had never really operated in the black. That since
Yeah.
day one, that it was being self-funded. So
Yeah, they should have, like, well, I mean, we can Monday morning quarterback this, all night, but, because I remember, like, because like, last week or a few weeks ago, he put the owner or the founder, he put out a podcast, like, basically saying, like, what's going on with it, and he said, like, he started out, like, deliberately trying to be, like, not profitable, but he didn't really say it, like, he didn't say, like, because I don't know if Good Beer Hunting is, like, a not for profit, like a 501(c)(4), I think it is, or if he's just, like, literally not trying to be profitable. But, like, if you're not trying to be profitable, it's a really bad business model. But if you're a not for profit business, like like a co-op or something like that, like, that's a different story. So, I don't know. I mean, like, to me, that kind of like raised an eyebrow about that. Like, well, you said you went into this, like, deliberately not trying to make a profit. Well, like, that's how businesses operate. Unless, like, you do, like, the value for value model where, like, it's basically kind of like how Patreon is, where, like, everything is, viewer or listener or member supported, something like that.
yeah, I'm not sure what the setup was there.
Mhm.
Michael Kaiser, wasn't he the person who started it?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's him.
And I thought he somehow disassociated himself with it a while
Mm.
ago.
He was a founder, and like they said, he had a few different like managing editors over the years.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm just gonna grab a drink.
All right.
I can cut this out if you don't want to answer. But what is or was your profession?
Oh, I don't mind talking about it at all. The profession that actually paid the mortgage for about 35 years, I was actually in welding and fabrication.
Oh, that's
Um,
pretty cool.
so at the time that I wrote all those books we talked about, I was actually I was doing that on the side.
Mhm.
I was doing the welding and fabrication up until about when the shit hit the fan. Can I say that?
Sure.
When that happened in 2008, with the housing crash, that's when the industry that I was in also crashed. And that's when I decided to, say goodbye to that industry and, make my own way with the beer stuff.
Did you have your own company or?
No. I worked for somebody else. I was with them
Yeah.
for 29 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I know those are like those um fabrication type jobs, like those are like at least six figures if you're good at it.
You got to be way at the top of the food chain to make that kind of money.
Oh, really? Wow. I always
Yeah.
heard like.
Unless if you're talking about management, but I was hands on. I was actually doing the welding
Okay.
and the fabricating.
Yeah. I met a lot of welders when I was in the Navy, when the ship was in the shipyard. Did you ever work on, well, I guess probably not in Chicago, but like
Yeah.
what kind of
And a landlocked.
project?
Yeah. Structural steel stairs of all things, stair and railing. So it's a very niche market, but the company I worked for did very well. We did a lot of the major sports stadiums that
Mhm.
were built back in the 80s and early 90s. We typically did the stair and or rail for those. A lot of the major hotels, Las Vegas, for instance, back in the 80s, they had a boom. They put up all different kinds of hotels. We did most of them. So.
Cool. All right, so getting back to beer, I have your two little books that I got off Amazon. Um, I definitely recommend these. There was one thing in here, I can't find the exact page, but um, one of these books, you said like when you're judging beer, especially like when it comes to like a specialty type style,
Hmm.
like say like a pumpkin beer, you said like like the best examples would be like it would start like on a base style and then build up from it. Like, because a lot of pumpkin beers are like usually like a brown ale base style, and then they throw the cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger in there. That's like my only contention is I think like specialty styles, I think like kind of like all the rules kind of go out the window because I don't think like, like a good pumpkin beer or a good Christmas beer or like anything Dogfish Head does, where it's just crazy herbs and spices and all that stuff in it. Like you don't have to have a base style, like as long as it tastes good. Um, you know, so like I don't know, did I read that wrong or do you agree or
No,
disagree?
no, I don't think you read it wrong. I think you are interpreting it, and not that that's wrong. I'm not saying there's a right and wrong here. Um, I think I know what passage you're talking about, and what I was saying that is when a brewer is making a beer,
Mhm.
usually it's to a certain style. They declare that. Now I'm talking about from a professional judge perspective, not just a
Mhm.
consumer perspective.
Right.
When you submit a beer into competition, you are telling the judges, this is this beer. It's this style, it's these ingredients.
Mhm.
And so if you're telling me that that's what it is, then it better be there. A lot of brewers just, and I'm talking more home brewers, by the way. A lot of
Right.
brewers just, they want to make a pumpkin beer or whatever, and they just throw a ton of spices or whatever into a beer and say, here, drink it. And you don't taste, you taste the pumpkin spices, you don't taste the beer.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem with, and there are even some commercial examples like that. You don't taste the beer. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
where they
That's
taste
a problem
very
for me as a consumer, but that's a bigger problem for me as a judge.
yeah, but they taste very fake. Like there's a few pumpkin beers that I've reviewed on this show, and I said this just tastes like pumpkin soda. You
Right?
know, like it doesn't really taste like to me like the best. I, not to just keep harping on pumpkin beers, but you know, like some of my favorite pumpkin beers, like Southern Tier Pum King or Cigar City Good Gourd. Like those are like it would be hard to like pin like a base style on them, but they're really good, like delicious, you know, fairly complex you know, just ales like with the pumpkin spice on it. And like tons and tons of Christmas beers are like that too, you know. Um yeah, I'd probably say it's funny because like two of my favorite styles probably are like the specialty styles, the pumpkin style and the Christmas style. And I wish my girlfriend Christina was here, or I'll have to show you the Tuesday night beer school we did on Christmas beers last year
Mhm.
because I think she would be a good example of like what you're talking about because we did Southern Tier 2 Xmas, um, and then a Belgian beer, and I think Mary. Uh, what's the one that Victory does? Their Christmas beer. Oh, I forget. It's like Bad Elf or one of those. Anyway, but so like the Southern Tier 2 Xmas. I don't know if you've ever had it, but it has
Mhm.
like a lot of spices in it, and like we're drinking it and we're going over the guidelines and like it's hitting the mark on like everything as far as like what a Christmas beer should be. And like they don't really declare a base style in that beer. It's I don't know, probably like a Belgian strong ale or of some sort or something like that. But
Mhm.
um we're drinking it and like off camera, she's like, "Oh, this beer is so spicy, it's so gross." And then like we're going over the guidelines and she's like, "Yep, yep." She gave it like a 45 or something. And as soon as we were done, she's like, "You can have the rest of this. I'm not drinking it. It's gross." But I'm like, "But you gave it a 45." She's like, "Yeah, it hits all the marks, but to me, it's a gross beer." Is that that to me? That's an example of like what a beer judge should be.
Exactly. You have to put your personal prejudices or preferences
Hmm.
aside. There are certain beer styles that I don't particularly care for, but
Hmm.
if I'm asked to sit down and judge them, I will. I have to. I should. And I have no problem doling out high scores to beer styles that I don't particularly care for. I know the difference between a good beer and a not good beer.
Hmm.
Whether I like it or not is irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think that's like yeah, when it comes to actual beer judging, yeah, it's more like like what we did earlier tonight, where you're
Mhm.
actually does this say what the does this meet what the guidelines say?
Yep. Yeah, the
Not so much how
guidelines
you
are
like
clear.
it. Because I used to be in like a lot of BJCP Facebook groups or Reddits or something like that, and I'd always like I kind of like troll the audience a little. I'd be like, you know, is a 50 point macro lager a better beer than like a 35 point Belgian strong dark ale? You know, everybody be like, oh no, the an average strong dark ale is better, you know, light years ahead of the world's best macro lager, you know. I'm like, oh, so there's a hierarchy of styles, you know. I don't know if you believe that or not. Cause like I really don't believe like there's a hierarchy of style. I mean, I think
No,
like the kind of inner beer snob in me would say, yeah, a Belgian strong dark ale. I kind of agree with that. Like an average Belgian quad is better than a really, really good, you know, fizzy yellow lager. But when it comes to competitions, if like I've actually judged like best in show where somebody entered a like it was probably like a cream ale or American light lager, and it was like, you know, fantastic quality. And I was like, yeah, this is better than the, you know, very diacetally, you know, Belgian strong dark ale that this person entered, you know.
yeah, when somebody says that a 35-point Belgian strong dark is better than a 50-point yellow fizzy water,
Yeah.
they have to rephrase that. They have to say they should say, I prefer the 35-point to the 50-point. It's a hedonic thing. You're
Yeah.
approaching it with your own prejudices. This is what you like. This is what you don't like. That needs to be part of the equation.
Yeah. What's your take on like The American, it seems to be a mostly American phenomenon of the non-alcoholic beer movement. Because I've talked to a lot of beer people in Europe, and they don't get it at all. They're like, nobody here is drinking, just the, because we had Sam Adams Just the Haze last night,
Hmm.
and like in Europe they don't get it. They're like, what's the point of drinking beer? It doesn't have alcohol in it. Do you? It seems to be a young person thing, so maybe you and I just don't get it.
Um, I'm not on that bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of with the Europeans. If it doesn't have alcohol in it, what is the point? Um, but I'm speaking for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are people out there who, for whatever reason, can't drink alcohol, don't want to drink alcohol, whatever the case, but they still like the taste of beer. So, thankfully, for people like that, there are products that are getting better and better every year. Thank
Mm-hmm.
God those things exist. Thank God they're out there. Who knows? One day maybe I'll be relying on the NAs for sustenance.
Yeah. Have you tried the Guinness 0.0?
I have not.
I would recommend that one because to me that tastes like 99% the same as regular Guinness. But like most of the other ones that I've had, we said this on the show last night, and in fact, it's actually airing as we speak. We did Sam Adams Just the Haze, which is like a 0.05 hazy IPA, and I said this tastes like if you took like a hazy IPA powdered drink mix, like Country Time Lemonade, except it's hazy IPA,
No
and
thanks.
it's like I don't know, it's almost like AI. Like, have you ever seen like AI art where like it
Yeah,
looks the same? It's like the uncanny valley effect, as they would call it. It's that to me, that's like what a lot of these non-alcoholic beers are, where like it's impressive and like for what it is, but at the same time, like there's just this je ne sais quoi factor that's missing.
yeah. I've not had too many of the new wave of NA beers. My
Hmm.
understanding is that some of them are very good. I have had a couple, but I'm not inclined to pursue them.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I like the Guinness one. I thought that one was really good because it just tastes like the real thing. There's been a few fruit beers that I've had, and it's also what's interesting about the so-called non-alcoholic beers is usually they only have like 30 calories, maybe 100 tops, so it's a lot less calories than
Mhm.
regular beer. I think that might be why they're catching on. Like for another, like I'm drinking a Waterloo right now, and this is like no sugar, no calories, no carbs. Just like it's a nice tasting, just something to drink with no calories. So it's like it's not doing anything for my body. And I think that's kind of has a little bit to do with the non-alcoholic beer craze. It's like, hey, we can still have this taste without the calories, and I can still drive home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a valid argument. I mean, there's a lot of people who are health conscious, so to not to drink a product that doesn't have alcohol in it,
Mhm.
one, they're not becoming inebriated. Two, they're not putting on the calories. Most people aren't aware that most of the calories in beer is the alcohol.
Yeah, and it's weird because like you wouldn't think like because like calories is like nature's like fuel for us. It's like the human for our gasoline. Like we need it for our energy. But like alcohol is like to slow you down, but calories is to speed you up. I don't know. It's very weird. You wouldn't think there'd be calories in alcohol.
Well, I'm no scientist here, but the alcohol emanated from sugars.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. And on another note, like so, it seems like craft beer is like kind of like on a recess now because like it was huge like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and in the last 5 to 10 years, it's kind of like on a downward slope. Like when 10 years ago you go to the beer store and there was like a huge variety of styles. I mean, there still is, but like as far as the American goes now, it's like it basically boils down to like three styles now. It's all kettle sours, pastry stouts, and hazy IPAs. Try finding. Remember, like, I mean, the viewers don't know about this, but you and I were trying to get two unadulterated American porters, and the only one we could find was Founders. And I'm going to do a show. I prefer to do like at least two styles,
Mhm.
but like you can't even try to find an American porter that doesn't have coffee or chocolate or
Vanilla.
marshmallow or something in it now. Um, do you have like a theory on like why craft beer is kind of it was every style under the sun and now it's kind of condensing down?
Well, COVID had a lot to do with it, but it started before COVID. Um, when hazy IPA came out, I kind of blame it on that as just I'm not putting down the hazy IPA style. I'm saying
Mhm.
that's where it started. When brewers, the craft beer industry kind of was built on the fact that they were making good quality beer, traditional styles, the best ingredients, so on and so on. When hazy IPA hit the market, it was considered kind of a bastardized
Mhm.
version of a style, but it attracted so many people into the industry. And because that was a hit, that's when brewers, it seemed to me that they all of a sudden felt like they had a license to start monkeying around with everything. And that's when they started throwing in all these different ingredients and using different processes and creating all these different styles.
Mhm.
Um, they weren't necessarily new styles; they were just old styles that were being, to use your word, bastardized. Um, and again, that brought more and more people into craft beer, and it started getting a little crazy just before COVID. And then COVID hit, and boom, everything blew up. Not just the fact that
Yeah.
all the bastardized beers were there, but even good quality beer was having a hard time. Coming out of COVID, there's been all different kinds of problems. A lot of breweries had to close. They were underfunded, poorly funded, overextended on loans. Um, a lot of people started falling away from the industry. Seltzers
Mhm.
came into it. Flavored malt beverages came into it, taking shelf space away from beer. So there's been a multitude of issues that have beset the industry, and I think it's going to be a while before this ship rights itself, and
Yeah.
it may never ever get back to where it was.
I don't know if you watch this channel on YouTube, Weird History Food. This is a good. It's interesting and entertaining, and educational.
Hmm.
And they did a video last week about it says why did we all start drinking White Claw, and they mentioned that as like when COVID hit and people were stuck home, they wanted to drink but without the calories because a lot of hard seltzer has a lot less calories than beer, and yeah, I would definitely recommend this video to everybody. Although like whatever they make is really interesting too, very breezy, and like just weird food. Remember, I know they have a video on Zima around here
Oh
somewhere.
my God,
Yeah,
that's
remember
going
that?
back a ways.
Yeah, yeah. These hard seltzers, like they take up like so much shelf space now. Because I remember going to Total Wine like before COVID, and there was like two or three aisles of craft beer, like both American and imports, and now it's just like one aisle because like the hard seltzers, there's like so many brands. Like Sam Adams, they make Truly,
Yeah,
and they also make Twisted Tea,
yep.
and like Sam Adams, they make more money off hard seltzers and Twisted Tea than they do off Sam Adams beer.
Yeah, on one hand, it's because they sell more of it. On the other hand, it's so damn cheap to make.
Mhm.
You know, when you talk
Yeah,
about expenses going into the product and the expenses or the profits being made from it, it's huge.
yeah, hard seltzer is so easy to make. All you do is just take water
Sugar,
and sugar and
sugar,
add
and some
yeast.
kind of flavor agent.
Yeah, you just squirt, some kind of flavor extract in there, and
Exactly.
you got a hard seltzer or hard
Yeah,
soda or whatever you wanna
yeah.
call it. Are you a big, cider fan at all?
You know, I regret to say that I'm not. As a home brewer, I actually toyed around with making my own cider. And for a while there, I enjoyed it. But then, over time, I realized, again, going back to my comment much earlier, I like complexity. I like boldness. I don't find that in cider. I find cider to be a very two-dimensional product compared to beer. Now, I'm not purposely putting cider down. I'm just saying that's why I'm not a fan.
Well, you should check it out because like there's so many like varieties of cider now. Like,
If you're talking about flavored,
yeah, like this is one I just got. It's a cider with all the berries in it.
yeah,
6.5 ABV. We haven't reviewed this yet, obviously, but it's a nice stovepipe can. My girlfriend Christina, she loves cider, and I just started getting into it. I'd like to get cider certified, and if it's funny, if you look at the BJCP guidelines for cider, they're like, I don't know, 10 or 12 pages, whereas the beer guidelines are like a couple hundred pages.
yeah.
Same thing with mead. Like the mead is only a dozen pages or so. Are you a mead fan at all?
Again, as a home brewer, I made quite a few batches of mead, and I was really enthralled with the concept of mead. It's a honey-based beverage, and the long history behind it. I loved all that, but in terms of as a consumer, no, because this doesn't do
It's
anything.
very expensive too.
That, and it tends to be on the order of in terms of alcohol content close to wine, similar to wine. So you have to reduce volumes in terms of intake.
Do you think the BJCP will ever have a homebrew seltzer category?
Yes, yeah, I do, and here's why. As long as seltzer continues to sell well in the market, the AHA is hurting right now. And did you say AHA or BJCP?
BJCP.
Well, I think it depends on if the tail is going to wag the dog or vice versa. I think the AHA is going to pursue seltzer and any other fermentable, and I think the BJCP will just follow suit.
Yeah, because I think the BJCP is a subsidiary of the American Homebrewers Association,
It
isn't it?
was many years ago.
Oh, they're two separate companies now?
Yes, BJCP split from the AHA quite a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
It's its own entity now.
Yeah, and I'm surprised the BJCP have never had like are they gonna ever introduce like a wine guidelines? Because it's like whenever you think like if you go on Untapped or Beer Advocate or Rate Beer, any of those sites, like they always have, it's always beer, mead, and cider, and it's like, but cider and mead are not grain-based beverages the way beer is, and certainly seltzer is not grain-based either, really.
Right.
Unless like, although a lot of seltzer is just basically, Coors Light or something like that, where they filter the hell out of it, so it's like it's clear, and then they add whatever flavors they want. But it's always weird. It's just like I always wondered that because like, why is cider and mead always like the cousins of beer, but wine is light years away, even though like these are all fermented beverages, they're not distilled.
And that's an interesting point because cider is this close to being wine. It's basically apple wine.
Yeah,
with
we had a cider. We had a cider last week that was like 10.5 ABV.
Yeah,
isn't that considered like an Applejack?
Yeah, so it has much more in common with wine than it does with beer.
Yeah, are you a wine fan at all?
On occasion, I went through a phase many years ago where I had access to very good, very inexpensive wines, and so I kind of had my time with it. But I always come back to beer. I will, beer's it's my thing.
Yeah, me too. Although I am trying to get into like at least trying to like I don't think I'll ever become a wine judge, but I do have wine for dummies, and I do have whiskey and I've been starting to get into bourbon and scotch. Are you a whiskey fan at all?
I can say with no doubt at all, I don't touch distillates at all.
Really?
At all. Nope. Zero.
Are you friends or do you know Lou Bryson?
I quite well, actually. He's another beer writer. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's more well known for his whiskey writing.
Yeah.
He and I have known each other for probably close to 30 years now, and I wholly respect everything he does, writing and otherwise.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just can't get on board with any distillates.
Are you a fan of like I actually have it here like KBS or Goose Island Bourbon County or like these whiskey barrel aged stouts?
Yes, I've been there pretty much since the beginning. You know, Goose Island was the first to produce a barrel
Yeah.
aged beer back in early 90s. So yeah, ever since then, I've been following the procedure. And by the way, I was barrel aging, wood aging
Mm.
my homebrew before Goose Island ever made Bourbon County Stout. But anyway, yes, I love any beer that touches wood. Um, I love oak. I love some of the more exotic woods that are coming out of South America. I love the combination of the wood with different beer styles. So yeah, I'm totally head over heels about that stuff.
But you never got into bourbon or whiskey.
No, no,
Hmm.
I can appreciate the relationship, but I won't consume it.
Hmm. Yeah, I've been trying to get into it. It definitely it takes I think it takes a much longer to get into whiskey and bourbon and all that stuff because like it's just so intense. You know, it's like 40% ABV compared to like, 7 or 6 or whatever
Exactly.
for beer, because like, majority of like what you're tasting there is alcohol, but I mean if you just sample enough of it, you can kind of I think like Lou Bryson in Tasting Whiskey, he calls it like getting over the wall or breaking through the wall, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, again, I can appreciate it, but you know, when I'm thirsty, I'm not going to be reaching for a bottle of bourbon.
Yeah, that's true. And also beer is more like um like you can put it for like pretty much any occasion, any time, you know. Like or at least like there's a beer for that, like you can get like the low alcohol, like especially going back to like the British, making like those like 3% bitters and milds.
Hmm.
You ever had those on cask in actual England? I'm sure they're amazing.
I have. Yep. Yeah, like you said, there's a beer for every occasion. It doesn't matter time of day or month of year. With food, without food, there's a beer
Mhm.
for it.
Yep. Before we get on here, I just wanted to show the viewers. This is your Amazon listing. I'll zoom in here. And like I have the beer for dummies here. It's funny, the cover on this one is a little different than the one that I have. And how to judge beer like a pro, home brewing, obviously. And here's this must be the first edition of Beer for
That is
Dummies.
the first one that goes back to 96.
Yeah, I remember because they all had like a sign,
Yeah,
like um beers across America. This is the one you were telling me
that
about.
was good. That was from 1995.
Oh man, this only has one star, one rating. I'm gonna have to buy this book and like give you a 5-star rating just to bump it up. What did this person write? I looked but could not find publishing date, and it turns out it was 1998, 20-year-old book, way out for today's info on microbreweries. Most did not exist even 10 years ago. Yeah, I hate when people leave reviews like that. I don't know if you know, but I co-authored. Where is it? I don't know where they are right now. Oh, here it is. So in 2014, I put out this book, The Handbook of Porters and Stouts with Josh Christie, and it was through like Cider Mill Press. I don't know if you know Carlo DeVito. He approached us about this because I was doing my Chad's Beer Reviews show and I had a website where I wrote, in-depth reviews of each beer, and I would take a picture and put it up there, and that's like what a lot of this book is. He just said, "Hey, I want to put this book together of reviews of very popular porters and stouts," and um, like he's like, "We just need like a few more for the book," and I'm like, "I can do that,"
Hmm.
and
It's actually a very
yeah,
nice book.
Yeah, it's a nice coffee table book. I actually think like maybe it's like actually a little too thick because I think it's like 400 pages or something.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of the beers that it's about 450. A lot of the beers that are in here they probably don't make anymore or they're not really easily available. And Founders KBS is actually not in here, so I've been nagging Carlo for like almost 10 years now. Like, let's do a second edition because, like, there's so many beers that are out now that we can't get that weren't available when this book came out.
Right.
So, yeah, let's see. I was gonna buy your book right now. I was gonna show. All right. So do you get a commission on these if I buy it off
Not
Amazon?
anymore. Not anymore. No.
Okay.
No, like I said, that was published in 95, so that contract expired quite a while ago.
Okay. Yeah, I might have to get a used one. A lot of these used ones, they come from like secondhand
Right. Yep.
stores and
Yep.
all right. So I'll look at that later, but I will check that out. And maybe we can do a trade, like I'll send you a copy of this and I'll sign it if you can send me something of yours or something like that.
I'll see if I have any of those left. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll have to
Yeah,
go.
we'll talk offline about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the question I always end the podcast on, and so far nobody has been able to answer this. What is the plural of Guinness? By the way, there's no right or wrong answer. Just nobody knows.
Well, Guinness is a family name, but you're referring to like multiple cans.
Yeah, like if you went up to the bartender and you said, "Hey, give me 3 Guinnesses," or "Give me 3 Guinness," or "Give me 3."
Well, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I would say give me 3 Guinness.
Yeah, I probably would too. I think it's like deer or sheep, where it
Moose.
doesn't matter if you say it's singular or plural. It's both.
Right.
So
interesting question.
Yeah, it's funny because you were just saying offline that you shut down your website, but do you have a website or something? I mean, I can plug your Amazon listing.
Let me ask you this question: when is this going to go public?
Sunday the 21st.
Okay.
You're gonna bring the website back up for then?
No, I actually have a new website coming. It's not going to be launched until probably the week after that.
Okay. Well, if you have the URL, I'll just plug that, because this will be up forever. So.
Okay. Give it to you now or give it to you later?
Okay. Yeah. Just email me when you have the URL.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks again to Marty for doing this podcast, and check out our Tuesday Night Beer School on Samuel Smith's versus Cigar City Brown Ale. And yeah, I'll see you around. If you want to do another beer school with me, let me know.
Well, after you see my next website, maybe. Okay. No, I would love to. It's a question of whether or not you want to. But yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much for having me on tonight. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Had fun.
All right. Have a good night. We'll see you around.
All right. Sounds good. Cheers.
Sorry, I just have seltzer to cheers.